I kind of stole someone else's PowerPoint presentation for this, so
Oh, great.
I'm going to give the guy credit. Um,
No, why would you do that?
all right, so this is Observing the Anomaly, Episode 2, UAPs in History. And I'm going to go through a mostly chronological history of UAP. I do have sources for all my information. I'll be recounting quotes from historians on events from as far back as 1300 BC.
Yeah, I probably know a lot of this stuff too, which would be awesome. So,
Yeah, I'm going to breeze through this section and go into more detail as we hit the 1900s. Uh, I find this stuff really interesting, what's being reported in ancient times, because it not only resembles stuff from modern times, but it couldn't possibly have been Russian or American secret technology because America and Russia didn't even exist back then. It can't be drones. It can't even
that
be.
you know of, bro. The
Yeah.
deep state's lying to you,
it
dog.
it can't be drones. It can't even be planes because planes, don't exist yet in that era.
Right.
Anything in the sky in the 1600s or the 1200s or the 200s or 1300 BC that isn't a celestial body is perplexing. As I go through these, feel free to jump
Now,
in.
real quick, just so our listeners know, how hot does a body have to be considered a celestial body?
I just mean like stars and planets.
The whole thing just flew over your head. Forget it. Move on.
Where was that? All right, so yeah, feel free to jump in. I can only answer questions about the more modern events. Uh, but like I said, I have sources. Basically, I kind of plagiarized a lot of this from Michai Morin, I think his name is. He has a 3 hour presentation
Let's
on.
hope so. Let's hope that's how
So
you say his name.
he has a 3 hour presentation on this on Project Uni's YouTube channel. So if you want to watch the 3 hour presentation, it covers a lot more stuff.
Or you can listen to our condensed version. And if you like it, then you can go over there and check it out.
Yeah, well, believe it or not, what I'm presenting is only about 10% of the material, and I believe even his version was like a condensed version because there's so many accounts from like way back in history, that it's difficult to actually sift through all of them.
I know
So
there's a lot of old religious paintings that actually depict UFOs in them.
yeah, I mean, we're really just going to be scratching the surface here, but my first one's going to go back to about 1300 BC with Pharaoh Akhenaton. And he had a unique experience that was to shape Egyptian history, according to inscriptions on the frontier stele found on the circumference of El Armana. Akhenaten was strolling along the river admiring the splendors of nature one summer morning when he looked up and saw, quote, a shining disk descend from the sky. Um, Italy, 200 BC, during the famous battle won by Hannibal, uh, which saw the largest defeat in history of Rome, a mysterious phenomena was observed. Quote, on the day of the battle, in the sky of Apulia, round objects in the shape of ships were seen. The prodigies carried on all night long. On the edge of such objects were seen men dressed in white like clergymen around a plow. And now we have, it looks like about 2479 AD. We have, looks like a Greek. Secundus was an early Roman naval and army commander. Later, he became an author who wrote natural history. This book later became the framework most encyclopedias are still built upon. According to him, in 76 BC, quote, a spark glowing orb fell from the sky and grew as it descended until it appeared to be the size of the moon. It then ascended back up to the heavens and was transformed into a light. That doesn't sound like a meteor. That's anomalous. We have Lucius Mestrius Plutarchus, also from around 56 AD.
Can you go? Can you just hold on a second? Go back to the first one. What was the first one?
That was Akhenaton. Akhenaton apparently saw
Yeah.
like a
So
shining
there's a whole lot more
disc.
to that story.
Yeah, I don't have. That was all I have is that little tidbit. I don't have anything else for that. There probably is more to this story. Yeah.
No, there's a lot more to that story. So give me a minute.
If you want to
I
Google
can't
as I go
I
through
can't
this stuff,
recall it from memory,
if
but
you want to try to
I know
Google
for a
it,
fact that there was a lot more that actually came from that.
yeah, we can go back to that one. If you want to Google it as I read through here, I'm still like way back
Just
in
do me a
ancient times.
favor, just because um I'm not like from Singapore, and I don't win spelling bees on the regular. Just
Well, how to spell
spell that for.
Akhenaten?
Yeah, I can definitely spell Pharaoh. I just need your help with hold on.
Akhenaten.
Akh. I got it.
All right. All right. While you look that up, I'm just gonna go back to.
Thanks, buddy.
All right. So we got Plutarch, a Roman army commanded by Lucius, was about to begin a battle when all of a sudden, this is quote, the sky burst asunder and a huge flame-like body was seen to fall between the two armies. In shape, it was most like a wine jar, and in color, like molten silver. Plutarch reports the shape of the object as like a wine jar. The apparently silvery object was reported by both armies. Interesting that, they're seeing something silver in the sky, and, this is, again, in like 56 AD, so there shouldn't be any planes or anything like that in the sky during this time period.
Can you give me the date on that?
The Akhenaten thing is 13.
Akhenaten,
It's
yeah.
somewhere around 13. The exact date is 1347 BC.
And it's a shining disc, correct?
I believe that's
Yeah,
how
because they worship a sun disc. And this is essentially where it comes from. I wish we had video at this moment because there's so many images of what
we can put links to that in the show notes. So just pick one that you like and share it with me, and I'll make sure it goes in the show notes.
All right, let me find.
All right, so 540 AD, Rome, Italy. Quote, often a little spark has seemed to come down from the sky to the earth, then having grown into a kind of orb like the moon, it has been seen as disc-like. Here's another reference to discs in the sky, which is hard to call a meteor, Now we have Japan, 596 AD, quote, an object like a canopy or lotus flower descends and appears suspended above the Hyorgi temple. It changes color and shape. France, 760 AD, quote, during the reign of Pepin le Bref, many extraordinary phenomena are said to have appeared in the French skies. The air was filled with human figures, ships with sails, and battling armies. Several individuals stated they had been abducted by aerial beings. So abductions were being reported in France as far back as 760 AD. We have Florence, Italy, 1347. Quote, writer Gianfranco degli Espositi, I butchered that, I'm sure, mentions that reports relating to the period of the famous Black Plague, this is interesting, between 1347 and 1350, speak of strange cigar-shaped objects slowly crossing the sky, sometimes at low altitude, dispersing in their passage a disturbing mist. John, did you catch that? I'm going to repeat this. This one's interesting. So this is in 1347 during the famous Black Plague. There were reports of strange cigar-shaped objects slowly crossing the sky, sometimes at low altitude, dispersing in their passage a disturbing mist. What do you guys think of that?
Where is this?
This is in Italy, Florence, Italy,
When?
in 1347.
All right, in 1347 is the so-called time of the
This was during the
Renaissance.
Well, this was during the Black Plague, and I found this one interesting because not only are they seeing cigar-shaped objects, which have been reported a lot.
Yeah, they're poisoning.
Well, yeah, they claim to have seen a mist being dispersed, almost implying that it was basically perhaps spreading the plague itself. Which is
you gotta send me this. This is wild.
Yeah, I know, right?
That's what I find interesting about that is that throughout history, there's been a lot of reports of, obviously, of like great floods. You have one like about 2500 BC, and then there's another one about 10,000 BC. And throughout my research, what I've kind of come to understand is that these great floods, what my best guess is that they are meteor impacts in the ocean, and they basically wipe everything out. They just like clean slate, wipe everything out. You had Atlantis.
Delete button.
Yeah, it's like a delete button, and then you have like.
I was gonna say I don't know how familiar.
Not everything dies though, and it also introduces new life too, which is wild. It mutates the existing.
Well, Jacque Vallee basically posits that one thing that seems to be it's pretty hard to draw conclusions about the phenomena, but one thing that we can say with a fair amount of certainty is that it seems to be influencing human behavior in society on a really large scale and acting as almost like a kind of control mechanism. And
what does?
The UAPs and the phenomena itself. The way that it psychologically affects us, and the way that it perhaps may even be affecting religious communities and spiritual beliefs, and kind of just shaping the course of history.
At the end of the day, it either solidifies something for people or it destroys something for people, and I think that's a shift that I think few are ready for.
Well, I mean, it's one thing. It's one thing to change like your world perspective.
People don't even live in the same reality, dude.
Yeah, but that's just perspective. But in this particular case, if we're insinuating the actual spread of disease during the Black Plague, which is a pretty interesting control mechanism. It's. Well,
I totally agree with you because. I mean, throughout, at least throughout my research, and I spent a lot of time going into like the great floods, and what it seems to me is that there was like a delete. There's like a delete button. Like, we don't really like exactly how this is going, so we're just gonna delete this part.
The Great Reset, right?
Yeah, I mean, like. If we want to agree that these beings have been here for this long a period of time, shaping humanity, maybe they have been hitting the delete button occasionally because they don't like exactly where things are going at that specific time. Black Plague.
Yeah, well, also the way
I think one of my favorite memes is it's this reptilian in a suit at a table, and the title is "Reptilian Overlord admits 2016 was just a joke, and the simulation will be reset."
Well, if you just look at like the way human beings, like our relationship with animals like cows and stuff, and even plants, and the way that we kind of like shape their we shape the evolution of the species around us, to better suit us. And
I think the most anomalous version of that though is the dog.
yeah, no, the dog's a great example of of us changing the evolutionary path of a species.
And they can't figure out what was it, bro? There was something about dogs that they don't have. What the hell was it? I gotta find this. Something about an ancestral link.
Well, I know that the humans are missing an ancestral link. Well, I mean, the point I was trying to make is if there were higher beings that were based, they could essentially be treating us the same way, we would treat plants or cows or dogs. And
But dog is like a syllable that, or a sound that resonates around the world and usually means like, has something to do with a being like that, a sky being, some sort of advanced, I don't want to say god or alien, but some sort of advanced being for the people, the majority of people around that time. Like the Dogon statues that were found in Sri Lanka. That dog sound is in Japan with the statues that they unearthed.
well, I mean, I'm not a linguistics expert, but one thing I know, I believe ma or mom or some derivative of that is also a fairly universal sound, usually designated, for mothers, which is pretty interesting because it even crosses root languages.
Yeah, it crosses languages, like
Yeah.
probably like, phonetic languages and
Well, there's different root languages, but the some derivative of ma or mom seems to cross those barriers.
it echoes through, right?
Yeah, it's like almost like a universal thing.
Right.
There's
I
really
find that
there's
super
no
strange.
universal linguistic thing though, because there's so many different ways to design language. All right, we'll move on from. I
Is
just
there? Design me one.
well, ones and zeros, but I don't. You could just do like, I don't know. There's like clicks and people. There's all kinds of different sounds you can make. Um. All right, so we're going to move on. I just thought that this one was really interesting, considering with the pandemic and everything going on. And like, I have my own theories. I mean, I shouldn't say it's theory, but like, if we're going to speculate, I think that a speculation that you don't hear people saying very often, which I'm actually kind of surprised, from like the UFO community, is speculation that perhaps COVID could have come from a cryptid creature
I
or
think
an
it's from the
ET.
ice caps, bro.
Or even that, what I mean. I'm surprised you don't hear anyone saying, putting that out there, because just the fact that we're having a hard time scientifically finding a link to what species it jumped from, and if you
But
understand.
we can show you every other species that it passed through before it got to you, though. We just don't know where it started.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, yeah, exactly. As we try to track it, we kind of like we lose the trail, and I'm sure a lot of people have put a lot of time and energy in trying to track it, and it's kind of it's a little odd that the trail went cold. And one explanation is, if the trail leads to something that's like part of a black budget program, or part of a species that doesn't officially exist, that could explain the trail going cold. And scientifically, something that people seem to have forgotten is that one of the major concerns with contact of any kind, whether it's extraterrestrial, interdimensional,
Contamination,
is
bro.
contamination. Yeah, exactly. The spread is
What
disease.
the fuck do you think happened to all those villages that were on the border of the Amazon or on the coast of the Amazon River when that dude traveled through there the first time? He was pissing in the river. He was doing all that shit. And he killed them all, bro. And then he came back and he was like, I swear to God, there was a whole civilization here. And, like, they just didn't understand plague. They didn't understand, like, I mean, it's sad because we eventually understood that if you gave somebody a blanket wrapped in smallpox, you could wipe out an entire community.
Germ theory wasn't established, but there was some understanding, at least by some people, because even Genghis Khan would take people that were infected, bodies that were infected with plague, and chop them up and lob them into city walls that he was trying to attack, in order to basically make people surrender out of the sheer fear of
savage.
Well, yeah, because you have raining dead, plague-ridden bodies, and because if he's like, if I can't storm you, I'm just gonna rain plague on you until you surrender. Right. But all right, we'll move on. Because we're still in like 1000 BC here. Italy.
Yo, you probably got some Kang blood in you, bro. Most people do.
Yeah, he irreparably changed the genetic
code of
the like entire species.
5,000 fucking. It's insane.
It is insane. All right.
Fuck that many people.
Well, and also kill. It's kind of part of your theory, right? Don't you have that fuck kill theory? Like.
Yeah. And it holds up, dude, to a lot of scrutiny.
All right, so Italy, 1546. Chronicler Father Antonio Cesna tells of farmers reporting, quote, a strange disc changing from yellow to red, with red fireballs shining beneath it, end quote. It was seen in two separate areas,
wizard,
including
Dungeons and Dragons, and he rolled a 1. Nat 1. Bro.
This is Italy 1546, another strange disc with strange colors and lights before airplanes should exist. Also 1551, Nostradamus, France. While viewing the night sky as usual, Nostradamus and everyone else in town witnessed a, quote, bright burning rod changed its flight path and was in the sky for 2 hours, displaying a swinging motion. It's hard to call something swinging in the sky for 2 hours a meteor, and I'm sure these people would have known if it was a planet, especially Nostradamus of all people. 1561.
If they're staring up in the sky all day, they know what's up there.
Yeah, no. So, well, I mean, he was like into like astrology and stuff, so he would have he would have known he would have known all the stars and stuff. All right, 1561, Nuremberg, Holy Roman Empire. Residents of Nuremberg saw what they described as an aerial battle, followed by the appearance of a large black triangular object, and then a large crash outside of the city. The broadsheet claims that witnesses observed hundreds of spheres, cylinders, and other odd-shaped objects that moved erratically overhead. And there's actually like an artist's depiction of this event as well. We got China, Yangshinshi Province, 1639. Suddenly, a luminous object like a star, red, white, yellow, and blue in color, flew over the funeral procession. The brilliant thing did not touch the ground, but it flew around the village for a long time, then rose up in the sky again. Its light was visible 5 kilometers away. Essex, England.
Out of curiosity, and I know you've already said that you didn't. You basically made like a list that we're going through it.
Yeah.
I think it would be a good idea to take each one of these and maybe not do a.
Are you still there?
But yeah, can you hear me?
You cut out for a second.
Can you hear me right now?
Yeah, I hear you.
All right. What I was saying was, I know you didn't do much research besides the list that you've compiled.
Well, I actually have, once we get into the 1900s, I'm going to start going into the details, and I actually did do research, but I just didn't, like, I can't research something from the 1600s. It's going to be way too time intensive and difficult to, for me to research.
All right, that's all right. So what I think we should do, because what I'm finding on Akhenaton is this experience essentially changed Egyptian society.
Well, that's the Jacque Vallee, one of his hypotheses about how it influences human culture.
In the matter of like 2 decades.
Yeah, over time, it has a huge impact.
But in like a matter of weeks, he moved their capital with brand new built buildings to a place previously unsettled. Like, I'm just wondering if with these other experiences that you're noting, if we could kind of dive a little
Try to
deeper
see what kind of
at a
impact it
later
had.
note and
Yeah, that's
see
a good idea,
right
actually. Yeah.
and see what kind of social swing or happen. And I bet we could, and edit this out. I know nobody's listening right now, but I bet we could probably predict with some certainty the behaviors of markets and probably people, dude.
Well, there's already people developing AI to try to go through this type of data to try to like make sense of everything, and that's actually one of the uh, main things that TTSA, To the Stars Academy, with Tom DeLonge was focusing on, and I know that they're not the only people developing AI, and Jacque Vallee spent his entire life researching this topic, creating he's like creating databases, and he's like a computer scientist with PhD in mathematics, and he actually creates searchable databases and collects information on all these reports, and then it's gotten to the point where there's too much information, it's too difficult to make sense of it, and you need to apply some AI to sort through it and try to make sense of it, because it's mind bending stuff, and it's just so perplexing, and it appears to be changing over time. You'll notice that people are reporting discs and rods and spheres, but they're also reporting ships, and they're describing it as a ship from their time, and you'll see people describing things in terms that are culturally appropriate for their time period, and that needs to be taken into account. And there's different ways of explaining that. People don't have the words to explain what they're seeing, so they're forced to use whatever words already exist.
And
but
that's
there's
the danger.
like you were talking
that's
about
the
a
danger
color
with translation, though.
well, yeah, try, like you said in the last episode, trying to explain a color that you've never seen before. It's you don't have a word for this color. How do you describe this new color you just saw to somebody? You have to try to describe it using colors that they've seen,
that people know.
Yeah, exactly, and it becomes very difficult to find the words to explain the observation, because you're observing something that not only is brand new for you, but it's also brand new to the person you're explaining it to.
And thus, how do you create it? And that's what I mean about like cultural advancement at the rate that it happened, and the way civilization popped up in Sumeria. And this is why that time specifically in human history will always baffle me and just trigger my childlike curiosity, because it just doesn't make sense. It would almost be like me being like, I want to teach you, I want to talk to you about these things. And all I did was talk to you. And then I left you and then came back the next day, and you had applied all the principles that we talked about overnight and changed the entire operation of your city. It's just one of those things that I don't see it possible, because you have to first see it, then you have to learn it, and you have to learn how it applies to everything else, and then you master it. But it doesn't happen overnight, and especially with things like agriculture and irrigation and domestication of animals. It's pretty far-fetched to think that just guys that were running around hoping to find some food that day were able to figure these principles out relatively fast.
Well, humans are really creative, and there's ingenuity, and
Yeah, but there's a limit. Like I said, like you just said, you can only be as creative as what you've.
yeah. Once you start getting into new things, that's where it gets interesting, and that's where another
And there's
interpretation.
so much trial and error.
Well, another interpretation of this stuff is that it's almost more like psychic phenomenon. The what's his name?
I don't buy that at all. Like it's this big
It's
collective. I think that's nonsense.
yeah.
I think
Well,
we would have.
it's a
I think
really
we would have imploded by now if that was the case. We
uh,
murdered too many of ourselves.
well, I'm trying to remember what his name is. The DMT guy. You know who I'm talking about. Um,
No, but whenever you say the DMT guy, I
not
just
Joe Rogan.
immediately.
Not Joe Rogan.
No, but no. I'm saying like I just immediately am like, yeah, the guy's probably fucking. He's probably a little fucked up in the head. He's the DMT guy.
Yeah, he has some pretty out there ideas. They're interesting. At this point, it's all on the table. All right, let's get back to all right, so 1665 Germany. Quote, aerial ships and a saucer-shaped object with dome were reported flying over the church of this town.
Wait, did people get dome, or did it have a dome?
Okay, I'm reading it as it's quoted.
I was just wondering if these aliens were giving out blowies or not.
All right, Nick. You made me lose my place. Aerial ships and
It's a logical thing to ask.
Yeah. Well, actually, there are claims. Well, there are claims. There are claims of.
I'm wondering if
there are
they're
claims
out
of
there
interbreeding. So I mean, that's not really something that I've done a lot of research on.
I hear they don't have teeth. It might make for a good old time.
Yeah, there have been claims of people basically interbreeding and even being raped and stuff. I haven't really researched those. I've heard of them.
Whoa, bro, let's not talk about the R word.
All right, so let me continue because we're still in the 1600s. Aerial ships and saucer-shaped object with dome
Feels like it.
were reported flying over the church of this town located near the Baltic Sea and hovered there till evening. Witnesses were left trembling with pain in their head and limbs.
Huh.
This is another thing that's been reported. People, biological effects, people getting harmed probably by some sort of radiation, and this is even being reported back in the 1600s. All right, we're getting a little bit more modern. This is the South and Midwest USA, 1896 to 1897. Thousands of accounts nationwide of unusual, sometimes glowing aircraft moving erratically across the sky. Some accounts describe them as cigar-shaped and shiny metallic. These events lasted over a year, with witnesses proclaiming their accounts in various newspapers. So you can find old newspapers from 1896 and 97 talking about thousands of people witnessing these silvery cigar-shaped objects in the sky. This predates the term UFO, by the way.
Now, is this in areas where people were starting to migrate west?
Yeah, I don't know. Your idea of going back and researching some of these in more detail is a good idea because you might get some more interesting information out of these. So,
well, you kind of flip my brain kind of, because I'm wondering if exploration caused us to see them more often, because maybe they lived in areas where people generally weren't living in high population, which made it easier for them to kind of coexist, if my fuck kill theory is accurate.
yeah, I don't know, man. It's hard to draw conclusions with.
You understand what I'm saying, though?
Yeah, I do, but you would need you really need a lot of data, and the problem is a lot of the information isn't like
concrete.
Yeah, exactly. So like trying to
There's a bit
collect.
of speculation that has to go into it. Yeah.
Yeah, so like there are certain cases where information has been gathered very reliably, but in most cases that's unfortunately not the case. So you're working with like soft data points that you kind of have to take into consideration that this might not even be accurate. And that just makes it even that much more difficult.
And
All
like,
right.
how horrible would it be if like the translations weren't even accurate?
Well, I mean, when it comes, I think to this actually gets into uh, looking at like ancient hieroglyphs and stuff. You really do have to wonder how well are we translating an ancient language that
Right.
like,
And kind of to mimic your one of the points you made, people um described and depicted things in terms that they understood. So the hieroglyphs that we're reading,
our bias
right?
is probably going to come in and creep in and
Right,
influence,
we're gonna see it from our way. Like,
yeah.
there is a clear helicopter hieroglyph on the what do you call it?
I've heard of this. I think I saw
Great
something.
Pyramid.
Yeah, I think I saw something on the History
I
Channel.
showed you this. And it's, I don't know, it's blatantly ignored. That's a fucking helicopter, and from their terms, where did that come from? Why is that written and drawn and depicted?
Yeah, well, the thing is, you're always going to because it's subjective. There's always going to be it's open to interpretation. It's another soft data point, right? Because you're seeing a helicopter, but
Well, no.
unless
Here's the
unless they're
thing,
showing you
Kyle.
the
Like,
schematics and
where are
gears
we
and
at right
stuff.
now? Where are we at right now? And this leads me to my Wakanda-like civilization that I pinpoint these UAPs on, is when you have a civilization that is allowed to advance, and they've been here for thousands of years, longer than the species that we descend from or directly descend from, wouldn't it make sense for them to have the technology that we have now 5,000, 6,000 years ago? And now they're where they are, and we're not there yet because we're too busy with
It's
bullshit.
I mean, it's one interpretation. Yeah, I
Think
mean,
about it,
there's
dude.
all kinds of
Like, that's a real technology. It's a real technology. And there's also planes that they have little dolls of, crafted out of metal, that they found buried deep in the ground. So these are old relics of modern technology by our standards, but to these people back then, it could clearly be a phenomenon that they were witnessing, and they did their best to interpret it to us. And realistically, like, our tech is their old ass tech, and we're just not even there yet.
Yeah, it's possible. All right, I'm going to get into one that I really like. And I first learned about this one reading Jacque Vallee's book Passport to Magonia, which I highly recommend. And
I hope you marry this guy later on.
He's the first person to interpret this actually as a UFO event. So let me get into this here. This is 1917 in Portugal. This event is known as the Miracle of the Sun. It was witnessed by 30,000 to 100,000 people and was recognized by the Catholic Church as a genuine miracle in 1930 due to the overwhelming evidence. It was religious in nature, but was accompanied by various UAP, and even photographed and documented cases of healing occurred that couldn't be explained by doctors. Unfortunately, all the cameras could capture at the time appeared as large white blobs. The Pope canonized the children the apparition first appeared to in 2017. during the centennial of the first apparition. This is a wild historical event when you look at it through the lens of UAP because it's traditionally considered a religious event, basically a modern day miracle. And I personally find it interesting this massive event happened right before the Spanish flu outbreak, and that the children saw the apparition and gathered the people to witness the miracle. And now the church considers them to be saints. So this is a really, really big deal. A lot of people don't know about this, and people who do know about it are probably religious in nature and are not going to look at this from the perspective of like a UAP event. But people were seeing, lights flying around, UAP during this event. And yes, there were like apparitions of like a lady in white that was speaking to these children and telling the children to gather people to witness this miracle. And people came from all over. And there was cases of a guy with a severely broken leg, and his doctor basically testifies that his leg was healed and that he can't explain how the bone fused together. It basically just unbroke itself.
This all
And
happened while this
event
happened?
Yes, and this was witnessed by, they're estimating 30 to 100,000 people. This was witnessed by a lot of people. It was actually...
It sucks that none of them are alive today.
It happened actually over the course. It wasn't a one-time event actually, but the big event, like, it kept drawing a crowd. It kept telling more people to come. It wanted a mass witnessed event. And eventually, it did a huge spectacle once somewhere around 30 to 100,000 people showed up. And, there were cases being healed and people were taking pictures, but it's 1917. So the camera technology was just
fucking trash.
Well, I mean, even nowadays, try taking a picture of a light at night and then and expect someone to take you seriously. It's just it's just a light. It's hard to make any sense crazy. Of it. Yeah, you're just like, okay, it's just a light, But it's something happened there, and like I said, the church basically recognizes something happened. It was a pretty massive event.
So it was big enough that they couldn't just deny.
Yeah, the church. Yeah, because you had a lady in white appearing and speaking. I believe there was probably some religious scripture involved, and telling people to gather to witness this miracle. So and all these people witnessed it, and people were being healed. So the church basically has to recognize it. They have no clue what's going on, but they're like, we're going to have to recognize this is a genuine miracle.
Something's going on out there, Bob. I don't know what we got to tell them.
And then,
something.
This is my own connection. No, this is 100% my original thought. I haven't seen this anywhere else, but because, I'm looking through things through the lens of 2022 and the pandemic. And this happened in Portugal, which is not far from Spain. And it actually happened right before the Spanish flu started. And, I might be connecting dots that aren't actually connected, but I gotta say, after seeing the Black Plague accounts, and then this account, and then there's apparently one of the reasons why we're even talking about this topic right now is because apparently the military is encountering UAP on a daily basis in some areas.
I was reading that. Where is that happening?
Man, it's like off the West Coast and the East Coast. I think it's usually over bodies of water is the thing.
Well, they come out of the water.
They have been observed coming out of the water, and I believe the people in Italy that are associated with the government that spoke with TTSA in that documentary that they straight up say that they were able to measure a signal coming from the water. That they basically say,
they're down there.
They're coming from the water. Yeah.
There's so much of the ocean that we've not even seen.
And the Italians claim that they were able to trace a signal coming from the UAP, and that it's originating in the water. That's what they say. All right. Los Angeles, 1942. This is a big, big event. 1942. Everyone's worried about the war. Unidentified aerial objects trigger the firing of thousands of anti-aircraft rounds and raise the wartime alert status, witnessed by thousands of California residents and servicemen, described as both metallic saucers and glowing spheres. And you can go through and find old newspaper clippings with the headlines: "Searchlights and anti-aircraft guns comb sky during alarm." People saw these things and started shooting at them because, it's 1942 and there's a world war breaking out.
Oh yeah.
And the first thing they do is they just start lighting it. They light it up, and the newspapers write about it, and everyone hears about it, and they end up not shooting anything out of the sky, and just claiming, everyone kind of was being paranoid and shooting at nothing.
Hey, sorry, we just
even though it was
about
witnessed
$7 trillion.
It was witnessed by thousands of people, so they're basically just saying those 1,000 people were all seeing things. But this is a common trend that's about to start. The 1942, this is going to be the common trend coming from the militaries. You guys, you must have been seeing things out there. All right, November 1944, Western Europe. Donald J. Mears, radar operator for the 415th Night Fighter Squadron, initially coined the term Foo Fighters to describe objects seen both visually by infantrymen and via radar by himself. The Foo Fighters are described as glowing spheres that move erratically and followed both planes and ships during wartime operations. Thousands of servicemen with the Allies made formal statements on their respective observations. So this is, a lot of people say, trace the beginning of UAP back to Foo Fighters. But, I just, obviously, just spent the last half hour kind of establishing that
it's not the case.
Yeah, that's not the case. But it's you got to keep in mind, people are on high alert and they're paying attention now, maybe they never really paid close attention before, because it's wartime, and now people are starting to see things and report them, and it's assumed that these were being seen on both sides of the war, and that everyone just kind of assumed it was the other side, and there was
they didn't want to spook anybody.
Yeah, and it was never really, no one ever was able to get to the bottom of what the hell they were seeing. All right, 1946 to 1947, Rear Admiral Richard E. Byrd, Operation High Jump. Byrd led a massive convoy of over 4,000 troops to Antarctica to look for post-war hidden Nazi encampments. At the time, it was believed the Nazis had amassed a force in Antarctica and were conducting weapons research. When Admiral Byrd's forces arrived, they were met by, quote, flying discs and, quote, glowing orbs. And Byrd's forces suffered a tremendous loss. Upon this return, Byrd was placed under strict control in order to remain silent on behalf of humanity. Now, I took this clip from Michai. This is a really controversial one. I do not believe the official record is as it's written on this slide, but Operation High Jump, in fact, did happen. Byrd did go to Antarctica, and it
was his third mission to the Arctic.
There were official and probably also unofficial reasons for that trip, but he did take with him a task force of 4,700 men, 13 ships, and 33 aircraft. So,
he knew what he was going for, yeah.
So I mean, regardless of what
the official record,
what the official story is, he showed up with a lot of people, and he showed up basically ready for a fight.
For a war.
Yeah. So, I mean, what exactly they were expecting, what exactly they were up to, if it's a
And
military.
so let me take that one step further. The crazy thing about that mission is when those saucers surrounded him, they actually had depictions of the swastika on them.
I've heard this. Yeah. Now, unfortunately,
Now,
that's not like.
Here's the thing: the swastika is not a
Nazi. Yeah, they don't own that
Nazi
symbol.
symbol.
Yeah, yeah.
The swastika is owned by
Well, no one owns a symbol.
it's not really. It's been propagated throughout history.
Yeah.
The Nazis bastardized it and switched it around,
like they did with a lot of things.
Right. They were fascinated with the occult. The swastika appears in a lot of occultism. The natural swastika. It's really just the natural order of things, 4 points, the directions of the compass. Essentially, a lot
it's
of
ubiquitous, actually. That and there's different derivatives, but yeah, it's really common and it's very historical. And yeah, the Nazis kind of like ruined it for everybody by adopting
and
it.
It's very rune-like. So the fact that it is very rune-like, it's very old, it's very archaic. So the people that have these ships that surrounded Admiral Byrd, in his own testimony.
Well, that's not like official documents, though. That's like, that's one of those.
I believe that's his son's testimony.
Yeah, like I said, this is a real gray area. If this. You could
My
do
cousin's actually like he's an expert on this shit.
Yeah, you could do a lot of research on this one. This is a big one. The Admiral Byrd one's a big one. I don't want to focus on.
I love Inner Earth and all that.
Oh yeah. This gets into the inner. Yeah, it does get into the Inner Earth stuff.
This is more Hollow Earth. Unfortunately, it's been hijacked by those people. But the Inner Earth, there's a lot of. With
one of the claims,
material.
one of the reported claims was that he saw like a green landmass and
a lush city.
That there was like things growing in Antarctica, in Antarctica of all places, right? But yeah, I do think that my interpretation of the events is he came back from Antarctica and started saying some really crazy sounding things, and it probably put a lot of people on high alert and
like, wait, what?
And people were like, yo, you cannot say that. Like, has he lost his mind? Did he get hit on the head? Like, did he fall out of the plane? Like, what happened?
Well, the same thing happened with Neil Armstrong, man. Neil Armstrong went on an expedition after he got back from space. He went on a voyage to the Amazon.
I'm not familiar with this one.
Yeah, we'll do a show on it.
All right, so let's get back here. We are in June 1947. This is where things are really going to start heating up here. Dr. Oppenheimer, first director of Los Alamos Laboratory, and Albert Einstein in June of 1947. Both Oppenheimer and Einstein, who at the time held the highest levels of security clearance, wrote a top-secret memo to President Truman regarding their belief on how we should navigate the phenomenon. This letter was intercepted, as noted in the end of the letter, and likely never made it to the president. And I do have a picture of this reported this letter that they wrote, and some to show the authenticity of the documents. June 1947, Mount Rainier, USA. Private pilot Kenneth Arnold claimed that he saw a string of 9 shiny, unidentified flying objects flying past Mount Rainier at speeds that Arnold estimated at a minimum of 12,000 miles per hour. This was the first post-World War II sighting in the United States that garnered nationwide news coverage. and is credited with being the first of the modern era of UFO sightings, including numerous reported sightings over the next 2 to 3 weeks. And there's newspaper clippings of this one because this was made national attention. Now, what also happened in 1947? Roswell. So just a month later, July 8th, 1947, you have Roswell. I'm not even going to go into Roswell. It's such a huge thing, and it's actually super... it's so long ago. There's so many claims, and nothing... It's gotten... you can't really substantiate anything because it's been so long ago, and Roswell didn't really kind of resurface until like decades after it happened. So it's kind of... a lot of the stuff
It's
becomes...
definitely muddied.
It's muddied, yeah, and it's super interesting. Something happened without a doubt, but I'm not gonna... You'd have to do an entire episode to try to peel the layers off that one. But it's an interesting
The
time
Russians
period.
had their own Roswell event as well,
Oh yeah, there's stuff in China,
where
there's
they
stuff in
actually
Russia.
found a
Well,
survivor.
I don't have this in here, but before I forget, this is something I recently came across. Believe it or not, something... I believe this is verified that something crashed in Italy. I think in the like in the 30s, and Mussolini got his hands on it and thought it was German.
He thought it was German, and the Allies shot it down.
Yeah, and it eventually got confiscated after the war by the U.S. And there's some accusations that was not German. It wasn't German. But anyways, all right. So back to 1947, because this is where things get real crazy. All right. So Roswell happens July 8th, and in order to tell the story of Roswell without going into Roswell, I want to tell the story of James Forrestal. Probably saying his name wrong. Forrestal. Forrestal. James was the first U.S. Secretary of Defense of the newly created Department of Defense on July 26, 1947, just 16 days after the infamous Roswell incident on July 8th. James died March 29, 1949, from a 16-story fall from a window. He was under psychiatric evaluation at the time of his death and was ruled a suicide. However, details around the death allude to foul play. I'm not going to go into the details, but definitely look this guy up. It's a crazy story. What I want to go into here is the timeline. July 8th was the Roswell event, 1947. July 9th, the National Security Act is passed in the Senate, so the very next day. And then July 19th, just 10 days after that, the National Security Act is passed in the House. Imagine getting legislation passed that fast nowadays. July 26th, President Truman signs the National Security Act into law, which set up a unified military command known as the National Military Establishment, and the Department of Defense is officially created. So this is how the Department of Defense was actually created. It was created officially July 26, 1947, just a couple weeks after Roswell happened. And September 18th, same year, the National Military Establishment formally begins operations, and CIA is formed. James becomes the first U.S. Secretary of Defense under the newly created Department of Defense. The efforts to begin the National Security Act started back in 1944. However, perhaps by coincidence, it was abruptly passed by the Senate one day after Roswell and signed into law 18 days later. 2 months after Roswell, the entire military is rearranged with the creation of the DoD and the CIA, with James Forrestal put in charge of it all as the first Secretary of Defense. If anybody was in the know, it was him. James later had what appears to be a nervous breakdown and was forced to resign in 1949, and in very short term appears to have been Epsteined. So I had to include that one because it took me a lot of time to learn that story. And there's more to it. I don't know if we have the time to go into all the details. But yeah, the formation of the modern architecture of the military and the national security state, and all these secret programs, that was formed almost immediately after Roswell, although it was kind of in the making about 3 years before, but it just snapped into formation coincidentally right after Roswell. And then the guy that was put in charge of all of it, if anyone knew at that particular moment in time what happened at Roswell, it was probably that guy. You know what I mean? Because he's at the head of this new organizational structure, and
And then he goes crazy.
he has what appears to me to be a nervous breakdown. You got to understand, it's a different time back then, and uh, the way that they approached um, psychiatric conditions was pretty horrible.
Oh, it's primitive, bro.
Yeah, well, I mean, they're talking about electroshock therapy was still like, and lobotomies
The
were,
norm.
yeah. So like this, you know what I mean? Like, they're like, oh, you're depressed.
This will calm you down. We're gonna scoop some of your brain out.
Yeah,
Come
it's
here.
like, like, oh, you're hysterical. You're hysterical. let me shock your brain.
You know what your wife needs? She needs to be in a bland room for 6 weeks.
Tell you what, we can fix.
You need to sleep in therapy, woman.
We can fix this problem with your wife. We just chop a little piece of her brain out. All right, so. All right, and then
You won't
and then
bitch
also
about dishes anymore.
so
Roger.
also if you look into the details of his death, his fall out of that window, it's so suspect. You got to keep in mind that, so like, he wasn't even he resigned and wasn't even like in the military anymore, because he like resigned, and he was forced to resign, and I think because they were concerned, that he was losing his grip. And obviously someone who may no longer be mentally stable but holds all the secrets, it's a no-brainer that he's going to be considered a liability. And they it seems almost like they were forcing him into a psychiatric institution against his will. I don't know if that is actually entirely true. Like I said, you're going to have to research this one in depth, but he ends up
Is this guy still alive?
No, he got thrown out of a 16-story window.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and it was ruled a suicide, but no one actually looked into it. And you got to understand, it was a different time, and the newspapers just no one questioned. People did not question the military or the media back then the way that they do now. It was very easy to uh, to just be like, oh, it was a suicide, and that's and that's kind of like the end of the story. People don't really question it. Of course, the family questioned it, but larger picture, people reading the newspaper aren't questioning it. But when you go back and you look at that guy's story, it's pretty wild. All right. I have a few other things on him here. So this is actually coming from Michai. I do not know how to substantiate this one, but I'm going to share it anyways. Maybe just take it with a grain of salt. Prior to Forstall's assassination, see, he's using the term assassination, so he's like a little bit biased already, but although, we're kind of all thinking it. He and young JFK became friendly, and to some accounts, Forstall mentored him, citing a clear relationship in which inside information was likely shared. They later flew together to Germany after the war to meet with local officials and to see areas of interest. And then he's got some pictures of JFK and Forstall together, I guess to try to corroborate that.
Yeah.
Then we have, all right. So we're off James Forstall, and we're into December 1952. This one's a doozy. Just the fact that it happened, and people don't know about it because they weren't even born yet, right? So December 1952, the White House Over the course of a few days in and around the DC area, radar operators from nearby Andrews Air Force Base and local witnesses saw objects flying around the sky, described as bright spheres and flying discs. This was during one of the biggest UFO waves in history of the United States. These were seen by witnesses and by radar over the White House and the United States Capitol. This is 1952. Jet fighters were scrambled, and when they got there, all the objects disappeared. When the jets left, the objects reappeared. This made front page headlines around the country. You can go back to the archives and find the old newspapers where people are talking about UFOs over the White House, jets scrambled. Like, this is a big fucking deal. Project Blue Book, which was active at the time, didn't hear about it until the newspapers reported about it. If you're unfamiliar with Project Blue Book, this is the military's official organization tasked with investigating UFOs. And it's largely kind of been chopped up in hindsight as kind of a sham. And this is kind of a good example because they didn't even know it. They weren't called to investigate this. They didn't find out about it until the newspapers were reporting it. A Blue Book investigator was stonewalled from investigating the incident, and the Air Force attributed the incident to unusual weather conditions. One jet fighter that tried to intercept the objects, according to Albert Chop, when ground control asked him, quote, if he saw anything, he replied, quote, I see them now and they're all around me. What should I do? And nobody answered because we didn't know what to tell him, end quote. That's wild, right?
What's even crazier is like there was no paradigm shift.
Well, the military, you got to keep in mind, you got to understand Project Blue Book. There's a whole history behind Project Blue Book. The public was fascinated with UFOs at the time, and the military hated it, and they essentially created Project Blue Book to try to get the public to calm down and forget about UFOs because, they either didn't know, how to answer it or, didn't want to answer it, but ultimately, this was a big deal at the time. UFOs were a huge topic at the time, and the military hated it. And Project Blue Book was a farce that they created to try to make this go away. And there's a whole history behind that.
Just discredit it all.
Kinda, yeah. We could probably do a whole episode focusing on the details of the various projects. There was projects before Blue Book, and then there were some projects afterwards. But they were all. You got to understand, like the military now, or certain factions of the government, and the military are now finally coming out and saying UAPs are real, but and the reason why this is a big deal is because the amount of effort they went to in the past to discredit it, and that's what makes this like so insane. Like what's going on right now, not just with UAPs, but also with people aren't really talking about remote viewing and Project Stargate a whole lot, but that stuff's been declassified, and both of these subjects are the reason why we need to be talking about these subjects is because there's only a small number of explanations for the discrepancy. Either they were lying then or they're lying now, right? And then you have to ask yourself, all right, well, whether or not they're lying then or now, why are they lying? We've established that there's a lie, and
right. What's the need to lie?
So what are they lying about? And then it boils down to it's either like John brought up, like it's either like a psyop, right? And if it's a psyop on the American public, which is basically like a crime. All right. If it's not a psyop, then some people might attribute it to a boondoggle ineptitude, fraud, and then of course maybe it's actually real. Okay, so these are the options. Okay, it's real, it's a boondoggle, it's ineptitude, it's fraud, or it's some crazy fucking psyop on the American public. Here's the thing. Regardless of which one you think it is, or if you think it's a combination of some of those things, every single one of those things is worthy of a thorough investigation. Like the American public should be like, I want to know what the hell is going on. Why were you spending money researching remote viewing for decades?
Right. And why don't we talk about it?
Well, it's been declassified, so now we can, and we need to get people talking about it more because it's a big deal, man. This should become um, the next big talking point. Like I want to see people choosing their next president based on are we voting for someone that is calling for transparency on these topics? Are we voting for someone that wants to get answers to these questions, and not just for themselves, but share that stuff, share those answers with the public, assuming it can be done, safely or whatever, because there are legitimate national security concerns with some of this stuff. But
right,
if there's no legitimate national security concern, it needs to be shared. This is aren't if NASA has discovered something that benefits science, uh, that organization was funded through taxpayer money, and that information needs to be shared with the scientific community. Uh, it's a breakdown of how this structure is supposed to work, and it's a very, very big deal. All right. I think that was my last one. Was yeah, 1954, which is
there's a lot more.
oh, there's a lot more sense then, yeah, but like I kind of
No, I think we touched on a lot of good points.
yeah, I think so too. This definitely goes back really far, and that's the thing, man. Like when I think about this subject, I can come up with um I really do think that there is probably some forms of ball lightning that could be misconstrued as UAP. And it technically is UAP because like we don't understand that, and I do think that that's worthy of scientific investigation because a plasma that can exist in atmosphere for a long period of time like that, it could, understanding how that works could help us develop fusion energy. Um, it could help us. Who knows what kind of breakthrough that could lead to? So,
Well, I mean, I don't think that. I think that ball lightning and that I don't think it's described as a UAP is not. I don't know. In my opinion, is not not correct because a lot of the times these ball lightning, they happen around like volcanoes. They happen around areas like Skinwalker Ranch, which is a meteor impact, and I think that there's phenomena that is described as that were kind of confusing as like a flying object when really it could be some kind of a natural
that's
phenomenon.
that's what I'm saying, and it's important to be able to identify that and rule it out because I do think that we're dealing with multiple things here. And if we want to get to the bottom of it and find the really truly anomalous stuff that's like, what the hell is that? We need to be able to say that was definitely ball plasma. And I also do think that understanding ball plasma in itself could probably prove potentially fruitful. So, all the more reason, like we really need to, get looking at this stuff, and I do think that, uh, you know, uh, the process of elimination, like we got to figure out how to categorize these things. um
Right. Otherwise, we're just shooting in the dark.
yeah, because that is what we're doing right now. And it's a huge problem. We're completely
We don't know what is what and what to comp to what or anything like that. It's just everything is everything,
Yeah, so
and that's no way to
so
collect data.
it's easy for me, uh, if I'm not thinking about the historical context here, to be like, okay, you know, uh, once we've ruled out stars, meteors, planets, planes, then we need to rule out ball plasma. We can't rule out the possibility, of uh, some sort of secret craft that's operating off of ionic lift and fusion energy, because I do believe that that's sound scientifically, and we may not know of anyone who actually has that technology, but at this point we can't rule out that someone secretly has that technology, and so like we got to figure out how to identify that and rule that out as well, and that's also a big deal because if we were able to identify that or prove that it's a big deal. It's like, holy shit, someone figured out fusion energy. um but yeah, once you start going down the list and crossing that stuff off, that's when it starts to get really weird, because you're like, all right, well, if it's not, you know, star, planet, meteor, plane, ball plasma, secret fusion, ion, stealth craft. Okay, now it's getting really weird because now it's interdimensional or warp drive or potentially off-planet tech. That's where it starts to get truly anomalous.
I think the craziest thing would really be a whole civilization here that we've never encountered.
Honestly, all these things are crazy. In my opinion, the craziest thing is like some sort that this is somehow connected to some sort of psychic phenomena. Um, that's the most out there, in my opinion, um, because I don't know, that one really messes with your mind. Something that is both psychic and also physically real. Um, and some people believe that. Some people believe that's the case. And again, it can't be ruled
Well,
out. I mean,
something that I kind of toy with. I don't necessarily think it's fact, but I also again can't rule it out. Um, is what if like that helicopter on those ancient Egyptian pyramids is or was some sort of time traveler going back in time,
yeah.
and
Well,
or maybe not just a time traveler, but an actual rift in space time where
like a portal where you can actually see into the future or something. I
and
mean,
something came back, and when we're seeing these things are us from the future,
yeah. Well,
when
it also could be if we assume that remote viewing is real, it's possible that they simply could have been remote viewing the future, and that's how they were seeing um, a helicopter. And then some artist made a rendition of what he remote viewed and said, I'm seeing, this. We're going to make these flying objects. Um, it starts to get really out there.
there's
Trying.
so many different
Yeah,
plausible things.
I think that's a really good interpretation, because we definitely have helicopters, and I don't think it's definitely, I don't think like another civilization.
Would make a helicopter, right? Yeah, it's a good
Well,
point.
and like, yeah, I mean, they'd probably have like a spaceship or something.
Well, you're not going to travel to Earth in a helicopter.
No, you're not. No, that's my point. And it's like, if you're already here, that's the only way the helicopter makes sense.
Yeah.
You
There's.
know what I mean?
Yeah,
And
no,
like
there's.
propeller planes, John, they found uh, little metal artifacts, toys of propeller planes, and they made these renditions of planes into models, and they actually flew. Like the how these planes were designed were aerodynamic enough that they flew, and they found these things like buried deep in the dirt, which means they were old. They dated them about between 16 and 12,000 BC.
Well, the other thing that it could be is that, I don't know, like I'm kind of tinkering with the idea that, well, it's not even tinkering with it. Just through research that I've done on meteor impacts, like our planet has been like, it gets bombarded. For instance, just for the impacts that we know, Australia has 2 meteor impacts around 50,000 years ago. And then we know of a great flood around 25,000 years ago, and then there's textual evidence of another great flood around 10,000 years ago. And if that's the case, civilization is getting clean wiped, like every 25,000 years ago. Like a meteor impact that hits on land is going to kill almost everything. Like,
well, I mean, it doesn't have to hit land because if it hits water, it's going to tsunami, right?
It all just depends on the
well,
size of it, really.
Yeah, that's true.
Especially, it doesn't even have to be that big to hit water and to cause a great flood that wipes out all these civilizations that are built. Like, civilizations are drawn to water. They build right next to water. So
that reminds me, in that slide that I plagiarized, he has a clip of, I forget what it's called, but there is a site that apparently, I guess some people think that it is like the mythical Atlantis, and it's I forget what it's called. I wish I could find the slide. It's interesting though. It's an actual site with
in Africa.
No, I don't know where it is. Unfortunately, I can't remember off the top of my head where it is. But there is a site that it's in that slide. Like I said, I'll share with you the slide that I took a lot of these notes from, and the PowerPoint.
I actually have a lot of information about Atlantis, and I think I know where it was. There's a really interesting site it's in Western Africa. There's like rings.
I think this is it. Yeah, I think this is the picture I saw. There's a picture of it, right?
Is that the hole, John?
No. Let me see where it is.
It's not a hole.
No, it's like Atlantis was described as like
3 rings.
Yeah, it was like rings. Like the center was like where they had like the monarch. Then they had the. This is all described by Pluto. The second ring was like Plato. Yeah, the second ring was like the military. Then you had merchants, and then outside of that, you had all of the supposedly all of the like the houses and stuff, and like to the north of it, there was like a mountain range, and basically this location is all described, or it looks exactly like Atlantis. The only thing is that's confusing about it is that it's like, I think it's like 2,300 feet above sea level, and it's a couple thousand miles inland in like the desert. So it's like it doesn't make that much sense. But if you look at Antarctica, I think it rises like 1.7 centimeters per year. In over 10,000 years, I believe that's more than like 4 times what it would need for that location to go from sea level to 2,300 or 2,700 feet, however high it is above sea level. So it's plausible. At that location, they found 10,000-year-old whale bones that aren't. What's the name for it, Kyle? They're not like ancient. They're not like millions of years old. They're 10,000 years old, and they're like, why is there whale bones in the desert right here? Doesn't really make that much sense unless
it used to be an ocean.
Yeah, exactly. Yep.
Yeah, they find fish on top of mountaintops too. No, they really do.
No, yeah,
they find fish skeleton.
Dude, there's been reports of frogs inside rocks. You've never heard of that?
No.
They're geodes that you break open, and there's been reports that you break these geodes open, and there's literally like a living frog inside.
That's like the best fucking surprise you could get in a rock. A toy frog.
All right. Well, that's probably gonna end the episode. I can always cut it whenever I want. So I'll let it run for a little bit. But hey, what do you? So John, I brought this up to you. I don't know if you really had time to look at it, and I did bring it up in the episode. And I'd like to hear some feedback from you as well, Nick. I have this idea that we should start actively pushing to try to get people to make this topic a political topic, but specifically one that that is like bipartisan. And one of the reasons why I think that this will work really well is because it kind of already is. The Gillibrand Amendment um, is one of the few bipartisan pieces of legislation that's happened in quite a while. And I don't know if you're familiar with the Gillibrand Amendment, Nick. I was telling John about it, but the reporting mechanism. So the Pentagon and the Air Force and the Navy, they all are required now legally. They
have to do audits.
They have to report this stuff to Congress, and they also have to make unclassified reports to the public on a regular basis. And that's because of the Gillibrand Amendment. And that was a bipartisan effort. And I think that we should be rewarding the people, the politicians that did that. And this will be a way for us to kind of regain the power structure and kind of rise above the left and right and Democrat Republican politics and say, hey, this is an issue that we all can agree on, that we want transparency on UAPs and UFOs, and we want to hold politicians and government and military and corporations all accountable on this subject. And it's a really great way to unite everyone on something. And quite frankly, it could literally, if it became a political talking point, you could make it something that raises the discussion to a higher level, and hopefully, ideally, get it to the point where this is where it's okay. If you're left leaning, then vote for the Democrat that supports UAP transparency. If you're right leaning, vote for the Republican that's advocating for UAP transparency. And if we can get both of those people elected in their respective parties, then it kind of doesn't matter which one wins the national election. Either way, we get someone who's pro transparency on this issue, which is kind of how they've been playing us. You know what I mean? Rather than having to choose between a giant douche and a turd sandwich, we kind of rig it ourselves and say, hey, look, we're just not going to vote for anyone unless they're talking about this subject and they're saying things, and they're advocating for transparency and actually writing laws, and not just talking the talk but walking the walk. And right now, Gillibrand and Rubio are a Democrat and a Republican that are talking the talk and walking the walk, and we should basically be voicing our support for them for doing that. How do you feel about that?
It's a good idea. Good idea.
Nick, what do you think?
I mean, I can't argue with the logic.
Yeah, and honestly, I think it would be kind of interesting too, because the way that everything's manipulated now, the way that they do the gerrymandering, they're using Facebook and and they're collecting data and then trying to manipulate people. And you got Fox News and essentially this throws a monkey wrench in their system if you get enough people to do it, because you're creating a new class of swing voters that you can't actually predict how they're going to vote, because this is an issue that they don't have any good data collection on. You know what I mean? Like, how do you feel with the topic of UFOs? This is a brand new fucking thing. So it throws a big monkey wrench into uh, into the system, like the way that they systematically break everyone down to demographics and try to like carve out things to try to shape elections. Because essentially, you do not have to rig the national election. You only have to rig the DNC and the RNC, right? Like and by the way, these are private parties, so it's not even like a crime, This is why the two-party system is failing us, and you can basically rig the DNC nominee and the RNC nominee, and then regardless of which one actually wins the presidency, your guy, they're you have someone who's going to represent your interests. That's essentially why corporations are able to have more of a say right now than the actual people, through that type of manipulation. So this is kind of us doing the same thing. We're saying, hey, you know what? People tried making third parties and it's not working. This is a great way to kind of to turn the system in on itself and be like, hey, you can keep voting Democrat and Republican, but make sure we're going to make our new wedge issue. You know what I mean? The way that some people only vote on like one thing, like this is the one thing right here. Are you advocating transparency on UFOs? And you can make a decentralized movement out of it too. So rather than trying to create a third party, you just make a decentralized third party that says, let's just vote for people that are advocating for transparency, regardless of what party they're in. And then if you're lucky enough to have candidates from both sides, then you can vote for the one that happens to lean towards your particular leaning. And problem solved.
Well, then we at least get that done.
Yeah, well, honestly, getting that done, I think would be, because here's the thing, man, something is rotten, right? And making progress on this subject is probably going to lead to the rot, right?
Well, I think, yeah, it would have to.
Yeah, exactly. So it's very logical to focus on this because that the accountability and transparency that it creates will have a bleed over effect into other things as well, and it also demonstrates the power that the people have, something that hasn't been demonstrated in quite a while. If we can create our own wedge issue that cannot be manipulated by two competing multi-conglomerate media organizations, if we're able to transcend that for the first time in a long time, it's also like a huge symbolic win just for like the average person. It's a demonstration of unity, which I think we kind of need right now.
Yeah, I like it. The alien party.
Yeah, but the idea here is not to make it like a third party, to make it like a decentralized movement that's advocating to actually play within the two-party system, but just to make this the singular wedge issue and just reward people regardless of what party they're in for it. And it's a numbers game. If we do this, you're going to get options, probably on the left and the right, because it's already a surprisingly bipartisan issue, and we want to keep it that way, and we want to make it even more bipartisan. And then once you have multiple options of people that are advocating for this wedge issue, then you can say, all right, well, who's the one that leans the most towards my particular viewpoints, right? Because that's the way it should be. you know, this is a way to get people uh, to not just create transparency and accountability, but to get actual representation. You know what I mean? Like when the public says, this is an important issue that I want Congress to do something about, Congress is supposed to then do something about it, representative democracy. So we have to demonstrate that we still have that ability. Because I do think there's a growing loss of faith that we even have that ability.